Wolfman is one of the first major releases of 2025, but did it have me howling with delight or raising my leg to take an all fours pee all over the theater floor? Well, stick around and I will let you know my personal thoughts. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Sean Morgan and I love movies. I also love horror movies and the old school Universal monsters at that. I'm always on the lookout for adaptations or interesting takes on that gang of nutcases. For example, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein coming out later this year, Maggie Gyllenhaal's Bride of Frankenstein feature coming out later this year, both very anticipated for me. And of course, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, which came out this past Christmas, which was, of course, heavily inspired by Dracula. But, Dracula and Frankenstein, they get a lot of play compared to characters like the Invisible Man or the creature from the Black Lagoon or the Wolfman. So when modern horror movie icon Lee Winnell announced that he was directing a new version of Wolfman, I was instantly anticipating it, even let the hair grow out a little bit for an appropriate kind of themed look when I went to the theater, not because of laziness or anything like that regarding my facial hair. I just wanted to be on theme. And I think Winnell's work on the Saw franchise is really fun, and I have fondness even for the bad movies in that series. Winnell also directed Insidious Chapter 3 in 2015, which, to be honest, I don't really remember at all, despite having done a rewatch of that entire series relatively recently ahead of the, I believe, fifth entry, whichever the last one was. I watched all Insidious movies, including 3. And sorry to Lee Winnell for that opinion, but I really struggled to recall anything from Insidious Chapter 3. It is forgettable. But Winnell's 2018 film Upgrade was one of my favorite underrated movies of that year. It is totally worth checking out. It is sort of the best Venom movie that isn't a Venom movie, in my opinion. And, Winnell's 2020 adaptation of The Invisible Man was quite honestly one of my favorite films of that entire year. That was, of course, the year that the COVID-19 pandemic locked down everybody. So I didn't see a ton of movies in a theater, but I got to see The Invisible Man before the entire country shut down. And quite honestly, I adore that movie. I thought it was well acted, engaging, staged in a cool way, and I vibed with pretty much every decision made throughout. I still think about that scene at the restaurant. If you know, you know. And, I say all of this to say that I maybe already had high hopes going into Wolfman, as my estimation of Winnell as a director has only gone up with each new director credit on his IMDb. I also love Christopher Abbott, the star of the film, in things like Girls and Sanctuary and Poor Things, and even his short stint in the otherwise awful Craven the Hunter. Christopher Abbott really is just one of my guys. I'm excited to see him in stuff. I also really like Julia Garner, though my only real exposure to her was in the film The Assistant. She is phenomenal in that movie. Highly recommend that film if you have not seen it. So, even with all of these high opinions of these various creatives involved, however, I found Wolfman to be ultimately kind of a letdown. It isn't without moxie, that's for sure. Like, some of the craft is very interesting, as Abbott, and I don't think this is a spoiler, it's in the trailer. As Abbott begins to transform, the ways that the camera moves or sound cuts in and out to communicate his changing state are all very creative and imaginative. The sound design of the movie is sick, and I loved being put into Abbott's mind as small sounds begin to get louder and louder as his senses enhance. Or he slowly begins to lose his understanding of English as his wolf nature takes over. So, as characters are speaking to him, we, the audience, start to understand less. Their dialogue gets kind of garbled if we're seeing things from his perspective. And then the camera will kind of swivel around to, for example, Julia Garner's perspective, and suddenly we do understand the words that she's saying because we're no longer in Abbott's perspective. I thought that was creative and cool and a fun way of communicating that. However, the movie still felt unfocused to me on the whole. The movie seems to be going for the classic, tried and true kind of modern horror movie trope of being about generational trauma, and that's fine. It's perfectly allowed to do that, in its script. But I don't really think that it really hits that idea in the bullseye. You know what I mean? I will issue a spoiler warning here because, in order to talk about my frustration with the film, I do have to spoil some things. The movie tries to paint this picture of Blake, played by Christopher Abbott, taking his father's paranoia and being in danger of passing it down onto his daughter and scarring her by being too overprotective. And that's an okay idea to shoot for, but the pacing around the events of the film, and to be honest, the events of the film themselves, failed to really hold my attention in an engaging way. As Abbott transforms and the trio of the father, daughter, and wife have to contend with the already existing Wolfman outside their door while Abbott himself is transforming, the way that the movie rolls out its events is sort of perplexing and felt a little bit aimless to a degree. The majority of the movie is the family running outside, seeing the Wolfman, running back inside, making eyes at Christopher Abbott as he continues to transform, running outside, then running inside again. And sometimes they are inside a house, sometimes they're inside like a covered portion of farmland, sometimes it's a barn, but the notes are all varying degrees of what I thought to be kind of the same thing. And the movie eventually reaches a point where Christopher Abbott goes full Wolfman and protects his family from the other already existing Wolfman in kind of a superhero fight style, uh, opposing forces with the same exact set of powers kind of vibe, kind of fight sequence. But the movie kind of does that and then chugs along for quite a while afterwards, when that scene alone feels like it could have just been a finale if you hit it with enough gusto. Um, so this is where the spoiler comes in. We learned that the existing Wolfman that was there when the family arrives was in fact Abbott's father, who had been turned at some time in the last 30 years, which was, not a surprise to somebody like me who watches tons of movies. So, if you did watch this film and you found that to be something that worked for you, more power to you. But I was kind of just waiting for that to come. So when it happened, I was not particularly moved in any way. Um, and then after he bests his dad, Abbott then goes from good werewolf to bad werewolf and kind of just takes his dad's place in terror, in becoming the villain of the movie, essentially, and terrorizing his wife and daughter on the farm. And I get it. I get what they're going for, right? Christopher Abbott's character protects his family in that moment, but violently by killing this other being. And in doing so, he is taking his dad's place and is literally continuing a cycle of violence and trauma in front of his family's eyes. And eventually, Blake, Christopher Abbott, he sacrifices himself or allows himself in werewolf form to be killed. And that's, the implication of him ending the cycle of pain. I understand that and I get it, but the ingredients that all lead up to the final product of this sort of thematic stew just somehow did not come together for me in like a satisfying bite, if I'm continuing on with the kind of cooking metaphor. And I hope that makes sense, and I don't think I'm alone given that the critical response seems to be a little bit mixed on this particular movie. So, where would Wolfman end up ranking on my scale of A list, amazing, average, abysmal, or needing to be abolished? I think that this movie is like a soft 3 out of 5 if I were doing a numerical scale here. So I would have to give it an average rating, so kind of right down the middle there. And, I do really, really wish it had all come together in a little bit neater of a package because I so enjoyed The Invisible Man and Upgrade. I like so many of the creative people involved, and I appreciate so much of the craft involved. You know, Blumhouse productions are not entirely my cup of tea necessarily. There are certain Blumhouse movies I really, really enjoy, and I won't go into a whole list of them. And then there are others that I think they taste very, at this point in Blumhouse's kind of uh you know in their established, I guess, career, for lack of a better term, as a studio. There are releases that they have where I just kind of know exactly the flavor of chip I'm getting, in not in like a particularly exciting way, if that makes sense. And I guess I'm obsessed with these food metaphors for some reason. I'm ravenous, just like a wolf man, or maybe I just haven't eaten enough today. But I hope that that criticism makes sense. Um, I can't, however, just crap all over this film in good conscience. There are definitely things to like about it, and I do admire a lot of like I said, the pieces that make up the final product here, even if the final product itself is not something that I feel I'm going to return to very often. Um, I saw this film as a part of an experiment where I see as many movies as possible with AMC A-List in a single year. I saved $8.49 seeing this film in IMAX. I still think that that's a solid deal, even if the movie wasn't necessarily an instant favorite for me or anything. So, what did you think of The Wolfman if you saw it? Am I being too harsh on it? Do you like it the best out of Winnell's other directorial efforts? Or, just tell me what your favorite Universal monster is. I've also I've always been partial to the Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Invisible Man. For some reason, those guys just really resonate with me. I kind of think underwater stuff is really creepy, so that's why I like the Creature. And then I just think the idea of the Invisible Man, like again, it's the idea of the unseen. Like he literally could be right behind you, planning some sort of diabolical plot, and you would not even know it. Like I said, the restaurant scene from the 2020 Invisible Man. If you know what I'm talking about, you know, very very impactful, cool scene. Um, but anyway, those are my thoughts on 2025's Wolfman. Kind of a lackluster start to the year in terms of big studio releases, but there's plenty of time for everybody to make up ground. So feel free to subscribe to this channel or like this video if you would enjoy doing that, and to get my thoughts on further theatrical releases as they come out. Until then, stay safe, stay out of the full moon, and don't get bit by nothing. All right, bye.